Joining us now is Dr. Quentin Kidd. And boy, it's been way too long since he's been on. Dr. Kidd, professor of political science and director of the Wasson Center for Public Policy, has a new poll out. Dr. Kidd, good to have you with us, man.
Good to be back. It's been a while.
I know, you got off our radar screen. My fault, not yours. But look, we're excited to have you back. And I saw the poll you released yesterday on the Richmond mayoral race, saying that Joe Morrissey has a solid lead. As everyone knows, I predicted in the spring that Morrissey was going to win this race. Can you break this down for our listeners?
Yeah, so if you bought Morrissey futures in the spring, then they're looking okay right now. But Remember, we still have 2 months to Election Day, so a lot can happen. But as it stands right now, Joe Morrissey is leading the mayor's race in Richmond with 28% of the vote. Second place happens to be undecided with 24% of the vote. And then Jack Berry has 16%. He's an official, economic development official in the Richmond area. And Michelle Mosby, who's on the Richmond City Council, has 10%. And then a lot of the other candidates fall down into the single digits below there. There are 8 candidates in this race. And I would say this, there's almost a 100% correlation between name ID and vote share. And in that case, Joe Morrissey, no bad news. There's no bad news for Joe Morrissey. He has the highest name recognition. He's also the most polarizing candidate in the race. 85% of people or so can tell you whether they like him or don't like him, but they're pretty split. 40% like him, 44% don't like him. So he's very polarizing, but he's dominating the oxygen in the Richmond mayor's race right now.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is the kind of established candidate is LeVar Stoney. You got him at 7%. He was the Secretary of Commerce for the Commonwealth in Terry McAuliffe's cabinet. He's raised a ton of money. He's just not going to keep that in the bank. We expect him to go negative big time. But here's the thing, and I think you just nailed it. This is why I don't think Stoney has a shot in this race. He's going to go negative, but 85% of the people that came up in this poll already have an opinion on Joe, and they're split. So all the negative ads are going to do is reconfirm the 40% that don't like him. And I think for the 40% that do, you know, sometimes when you go negative ads over the top, Dr. Kidd, as you know, they backfire. And so if I'm LeVar Stoney and I got, $750,000 to spend, I don't know how I'm going to win this race.
Well, so I don't know that he's going to go negative. I don't know. I mean, he may, but I doubt it. I think what he has to do is increase his name recognition, increase his name ID. His problem is his standing is also correlated with where he is in terms of whether people know him or not. I mean, most people, the vast majority of Richmond voters, don't know him. I think his challenge is if he's going to go on the air with use this money to go on the air, which I assume he is. He's got to do it he's got to introduce himself to voters and make himself a credible alternative. But I think your point about whether Joe Morrissey supporters can be moved is a good one. I mean, we know every bad thing there is to know about Joe Morrissey, I hope. I mean, there may be other things that we don't know, but we know a lot of bad things about him. 28% of voters in that context still say they're going to support him. And so I don't know what could dislodge those 28% away from Joe Morrissey. But I do think he has a real ceiling, and I think his ceiling reflects his favorability ratings of 40%. Joe Morrissey probably has a real ceiling of between 35 and 40%. And beyond that, he would struggle going beyond that. And so in some ways, if this field would narrow from 8 candidates to 2 or 3 or 4, I think then you might see a second person emerge from that pack who could challenge Joe Morrissey. But I don't know that the field's going to narrow. I mean, if you're one of these other 7 candidates, what's your incentive to get out at this point?
There's none. It's not going to narrow, Dr. Kidd. You nailed it. And it's not going to narrow because all of these people have a shot to be in second place. So let me explain to our listeners how this works. It's kind of a convoluted system, but it's pretty interesting. There's 9 precincts in Richmond, 9. In order to get elected mayor on the first ballot with no runoff, you have to win 5 of the 9. You have to win 5 of the 9 precincts. If you do that, you're mayor. Now, you don't need a majority in any of the districts. You need simply a plurality. So technically, with 8 candidates in, you get 25% or 27%, you're going to win. So if Morrissey wins 5 precincts and he's up big in 3 and he's ahead moderately in 2 of them, he wins on the first ballot, race over, have a good day, Joe's mayor. Right? Now, let's say somebody squeaks by him in one of the 5 districts and he wins 4 of the 5. Then what happens is then there's a runoff a month later in December against the top 2 finishers, which would be Morrissey winning 4 or 3 of the 5, and whoever came in second with the highest plurality of votes. Then it becomes a 2-person race. And then precincts don't matter. It's whoever gets 50% plus 1. So, having said that, Doc, if I'm in this race and I'm at 6% or 7%, I'm staying in it because I got a wide open shot to finish second. And if I do, I got a shot at Joe in the runoff if he can be held under 5 precincts. Have I analyzed this right?
Yeah, I think it's a good analysis. I mean, in your description of Richmond as sort of an electoral college-like mayor's race is a good one. And I think you're right. The real challenge right now for all of the other 7 candidates is which one of them can become the second-place candidate. Which one can become the other candidate standing on Election Day, hoping Joe Morrissey didn't win 5 of the districts. And so that's the primary concern of a lot of these candidates. The secondary concern generally of people who oppose Joe Morrissey is, can we keep him from winning outright on Election Day? Can we keep him from winning 5 districts on Election Day? And I believe there's probably a lot of scrambling. I mean, if you're thinking about this very strategically, you want Michelle Mosby to stay in the race because she's going to win her district. She's a city council member. She's going to win her district, the 9th district. She's leading it right now. So you can take that one off the table for Morrissey. And then you want, Jack Barry to stay in. He's leading in a couple of 3 of these districts. And so if you can carve up the districts in such a way that you keep Joe Morrissey from winning 5 outright, then you want to be in a position to be the biggest vote getter, but in second place. And that is so it's a really complicated dynamic going into Election Day with Joe Morrissey being where he is.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. If you look where he is right now, you look at these precincts, the way you've lined them up, and by the way, you did an excellent job on this. Just explain to our audience the 5 precincts where Joe's ahead, the 3 of them where he's way ahead, and the 2 of them where he is ahead, but within a number where he could still get beat.
Yeah, so he's leading outside of our statistical margin of error in 3 of the districts, the 5th, the 6th, and the 8th. He's really strong on the eastern side of Richmond, the north and south on the eastern side of Richmond. He's really strong. He's got a lead, but within our margin of error in terms of the district-level margin of error in the 3rd and the 7th. The 3rd is what surprises a lot of people. It's sort of a north-central district, and people I don't think we're expecting Morrissey to be doing as well as he is there. So he's doing really well in 5. He's leading really strongly outside of the margin of error in 3 of those. And the way the city's divided, I mean, Joe Morrissey's strength is on the east side. The west side tends to be, whiter voters. The east side tends to be more of an African American voting base. Those districts tend to be more African American in their makeup, and so Morrissey's doing really well in the African American community. That's where his strength is. And then the other districts are, Jack Barry has some strengths in the 1st and 2nd district, in the 4th district, and then Michelle Mosby is leading in the 9th district, and so there's a lot of scattering beyond that. But Morrissey's in a strong position. I mean, I think people are really worried. People who really oppose Joe Morrissey are worried that he could win this outright on Election Day.
Well, look, I think he's going to win 5, 6, 8, and 7, in my judgment. You look, and I don't want to get into the weeds here because we got listeners from all over the state. They're like, well, I don't really care about the 7th district in Richmond, but just explain to our audience quickly where the 7th district is.
The 7th district, I'm going to have to look on my map for reference just to make sure that I'm getting all this right. But the 7th district is up in Hold on, I'm referencing that. 7th District is the far eastern district in Richmond. So if you're driving up from Hampton Roads up 64, you pass the airport, you come around the bend there, and you come into the 7th District is as you're going around that bend on 64, coming into downtown Richmond.
It's like Highland Springs. It's like Highland Springs, right?
Yep, and that's right. And that's the 7th District, so it's the far eastern side of Richmond.
Joe is going to win the 7th, so I've got him winning 5, 6, 8, 7. So to me, the battle for mayor comes down to the 3rd District. I mean, Morrissey knows this. He's going to be spending his time there.
Yeah. The 3rd District is the North Side District. It's the far northern part of Richmond. It's a part of Richmond that has, in some ways, beginning to regentrify. There's sort of a kind of a population churn there a little bit, so that really probably is a battleground for a particular reason. There's probably a changing population there that makes it to where Morrissey has to really fight for that district more than he does, say, some of these other districts that he's pretty strongly in the lead in, maybe the 5th or 6th.
Right. So I've got him. I think he's going to win 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't think any of those are at risk. This is just my judgment. He is going to win Highland Springs. That basically, to stop him, someone's going to have to beat him in the 3rd District, in my judgment. Now, here's the risk here. Again, I think Morrissey is going to win on the first ballot. If he does not, whoever finishes second, then they get him one-on-one, right?
Right.
And then it's a plurality. And if you're saying his ceiling is 40% and he's one-on-one, now he's at risk, right?
I think that's the case, and I think that's a strategy that a lot of people are thinking about right now. I think his ceiling is somewhere around his favorability numbers, given that most everybody knows who he is and has a view about him. And I think that ceiling is somewhere between 35 and 40% of the citywide vote. And so if he ends up in a runoff, then, in fact, he could lose in a runoff if his ceiling is really between 35 and 40% of the vote, because whoever he's running against will become the anti-Morrissey, the place where the anti-Morrissey vote is parked. And if his favorability is really an indication of his ceiling, that'll be over 50% of the vote that goes to whoever is the Morrissey opponent. And so the real race here, in some ways, is who can be in second place on Election Day and hold Morrissey to less than 5 districts.
Right. So I can define it a little more clearer because I'm a radio talk show host as opposed to the director of the Wasson Center. So I get where you're coming from. So let me just define this for our audience, okay? I predicted Morrissey is going to win. I think he is. In order to do that, he's got to win 5 districts on the first ballot, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I think he's going to win those. The battle for mayor in Richmond is coming down to the 3rd district. If Morrissey wins that, goodbye, he's mayor. If he doesn't win that, he's going to have to square off in a month against the second place finisher. And just so our audience knows, it's not whoever won the other districts. It's whoever got the most raw votes. So Stoney, right, for instance, could come in second, win no districts, and be with Joe in a runoff. That's probably Joe's worst case because he'd be outspending that probably 7-1.
I would guess that if he ends up in a runoff, whoever's running against him, whoever's running against Joe Morrissey will be well funded.
Yeah, no question.
Because every anti-Morrissey donor will come, will give to that opponent. But you're right. If Morrissey wins 4 of the 9 districts, presumably he's got enough votes to put him in first or second place. But
yes,
here's a real outside of the ballpark scenario. What if Morrissey outright wins 4 of the districts, but he comes in 3rd place in the overall vote count?
He's out,
and we have a runoff with 2 candidates, one of which is not Joe Morrissey. I doubt that happens, but it actually could happen.
Mathematically, it could happen. I don't think it will. So I'm predicting again, Joe Morrissey wins the first ballot victory. I think he wins 5, 6, 7, 8, hangs on in 3. Hey, Doc, thanks for being with us.
Take care.